Well, we can't follow that introduction. So, well, basically, today's about Kate and her book. So maybe we should hear a bit from Kate about who you are and why you're here.
Okay, well, my name's Kate. I'm a campaigner and an activist, and I've written a book, which is why I'm here. I was. I've probably been a campaigner all my life. My parents were also activists, so I was involved in, holding hands around Aldermaston when I was about 2 years old, and supporting the miners, and then when I left home, I got involved in, first of all, in campaigning around detention centres and migrant detention centres, yeah, and then in Earth First and environmental direct action, and that would have been around 1998, and that's when I first started coming into contact with police spies, and Dave Morris, in fact.
Yes.
We were together in Reclaim the Streets back in 1998, mobilising around the Carnival Against Capitalism in the City of London. That's the first undercover officer I met, which would have been Jim Boyling, and then Jason Bishop, who showed up probably around the same time I did in the group. And for the following 12 years, I came into contact with a number of officers in all around the country, and pretty much in every political activity I was involved in, from environmental direct action to first aiding at gatherings. Like they really were everywhere. In 2003, I was living in Nottingham. I got involved in the Sumac Centre, which is a social centre there, that has been the target of at least 2 undercover officers. I ended up in a relationship with a man that I knew as Mark Stone. We were together for about a year and a half. I think it was 15 months, I think.
Okay, before we get into the gory details, so just want to give just a slightly bigger picture, is that the undercover policing goes back at least until the late 60s, early 70s. These units, but it was all secret, so that hardly anybody knew it was going on, even inside the police force. And they were targeting a whole range, maybe about 1,000 different groups were monitored or infiltrated or reported on secretly over 40, 50 years.
Several of them based in this bookshop.
Yes, so I mean that's where kind of I come into the picture, because I was involved with London Greenpeace that had an office here, but we'll come on to that a bit later on. But so Kate's talked about the movements, some of the movements that she was involved with. So what about the book? What's that about? And
so I had a relationship with Mark. We separated, but we remained very close friends I knew him for 7 years. He was around for a long time. And then in October 2010, I got a phone call. I was living abroad. I got a phone call from a friend who said, Mark's a cop. We're going public tomorrow at 2, and we don't want you to find out from the internet. And so that was kind of where it all started. It was very, very complicated writing the book, because obviously it didn't start in 2010. It started in 1998, but we had no idea. Yeah. For me, I mean, it started in 1968, but we had no idea until 2010. And so the whole process was kind of an unpicking, working backwards from that moment where Mark's girlfriend at the time found a passport in a different name in the glove box of his car that said that he had children. And that, started a kind of process of unpicking who is this man, and eventually confronting him, having found birth certificates for his children that included the information that the father's profession was police officer. But from there, all kinds of things just started to connect up. And about a year after Mark was uncovered, I was put in touch with a group of, at the time it was 8 women. It's now well over 50, I think. But at the time, we were 8 women who had all had similar experiences. And some of the women, like Helen, who, as well as being part of the McLibel case, also had a relationship with an undercover officer, had been, they'd had relationships with people who disappeared more than a decade ago in some cases, who they'd been looking for ever since, and had gradually started finding information that didn't add up. And Helen particularly had found the death certificate of, she'd found the birth certificate and the death certificate of the man that she thought she was with. And after Mark Kennedy was outed, this group of women came together, and there's, if you want to know their story, it's very difficult for me because I don't like to talk about other people's experiences and other people's stories, but some of the other women involved in my case have also written a book about their experiences, and there was an ITV documentary recently that tells that part of the story very well, of how the women investigated, and we came together. And up until that point, it had been very much a kind of personal betrayal. There's this person that I was close to for almost a decade, who I had fallen in love with, who I'd shared my home and my bed with. And it turned out he'd been lying to me. And meeting the other women was really important because we first of all, because we came from a wide range of political backgrounds, people who probably would never have spoken to each other otherwise. you know what the left is like. Sitting down talking to people and realising that, I kind of compare it to the sort of early feminist groups in the 70s, where people talked about their personal lives and their personal experiences, and there's this kind of growing realisation that this isn't actually just your personal story, this is something systemic. And just this understanding that okay, the things that were maybe kind of very personal to me actually start to look like tradecraft. And the realisation that went with that was these men were police officers, and the police are a hierarchical organisation. These people had commanding officers, they had back rooms, they were being run, they were not, this wasn't just a man who lied to get me into bed. This was a state operation. This was there were other people involved, and possibly more complicit, people higher up the chain of command. And we decided to sue the police. And from the very beginning, it wasn't really about the men that we'd had the relationships with. It was about the police.
It's the Metropolitan Police.
It is the Metropolitan Police.
Yes.
Yes. Mark was actually run by Nottinghamshire Police for the first 6 to 8 months of his operation, I think.
So before you get again further detail, so Helen, who was I was a co-defendant with Helen, the two of us, we took on McDonald's because McDonald's was trying to stop us giving leaflets out criticising their company. and there was a very, very big court case, the longest case actually in English history, where we successfully defended ourselves, and the leaflets went global, worldwide, but you said about the women gradually finding out that they had common stories. So Helen discovered about her partner being a police officer, but we also discovered another person who'd infiltrated London Greenpeace called Bob Lambert. And London Greenpeace was based here. So Bob Lambert used this building as his base to kind of spy on a whole range of different groups. So the women got together, but you decided to take legal action?
Yes, it was a complicated decision that was basically made by the time limitations that there are on bringing legal action, and that set the tone a bit for the process. It was like, well, if we want to lodge a human rights claim, you have to do it within 12 months. Like that's the time limit. And it was like, well, we've got 7 days to decide. So we're just going to have to do it. And then if we change our minds, we can pull out. And it kind of almost carried on like that for 11 years, really. It was like, damn, we've got a deadline. What do we do? Okay, let's just do it and then we'll have a think about it. And I kind of have a sense that we almost never got time to think about it until after it was done.
So what happened with the kind of collective case, and then what happened to you?
So the collective case, they stalled us, they bullied us, I about a couple of years into the collective case, I found a police GPS tracker stuck under my car. I mean, it's a bit like the I can't remember the phrase, but the American health insurance companies, when people file a claim,
deny everything, basically.
Well, it's like you deny it and then you delay it, and then if that doesn't work, then I can't remember what you do. But they had a very similar approach. So it was like, first of all, you deny everything, and they tried to get us to drop it, and you had a good quote from the book that you read out earlier.
Yes, this is the first thing that they said when you started the case. Quote, "The claimants have no real prospects of succeeding on any of the claims or issues." That's not, of course, how it panned out finally, but it took a long time to
we got a lot of
down.
letters like that, and then they started making applications for secrecy, and they started making then they started delaying it and resisting. The one thing that they didn't want was disclosure. The one thing they didn't want was to have to actually tell us what had been going on and who had been responsible. And eventually, when delaying and bullying no longer worked, they settled the claim. And so the kind of the last stage of their approach to the litigation was admit everything, and it'll all go away, and we won't have to provide...
And apologise.
Yeah, apologise. So they did in
grovelling apology.
In 2015, they made a public apology, and it was complicated for them by the fact that I didn't settle.
So you refused to settle yourself?
I did refuse to settle. It's quite a difficult thing because I don't want to create the impression that the other 7 women settled and I was the one who insisted on carrying on. Basically, the way that the civil law system is set up is it's set up to force you to settle, and my kind of personal and financial circumstances were such that I didn't have to. Basically, that's what it came down to, and the other women were told, if you don't accept this offer, then you could be bankrupted if you keep going. So I kept going. I kept going on my own, and I actually knew for quite a long time before the apology and the settlement was made public that it was going to happen and that I was now on my own.
So at the same time as the Met was settling with these women, the whole thing had been blown out into the media, this massive scandal about these spying units that had been going on for 40 or 50 years. And so there was pressure also to have a public inquiry, which is now happening. It's been going for, well, since 2016. And they've spent about £100 million on the public inquiry. We'll come to that in a minute, but this is going on at the same time. So there's a lot of different tactics. There's publicity, there's the settlement and the compensation from the Met and the apology, and you had a particular court case that you implemented as well.
So, I mean, so part of the this pressure for the public inquiry was that this story was kind of exposed by the women who were deceived into relationships, but very quickly it starts to expand, and you've got the fact that these officers were stealing the identities of dead children for their names, and then it starts to emerge that they were actually involved in running illegal blacklists to make sure that trade unionists and environmental activists didn't get work in mostly civil engineering, I think, but they were going way beyond any kind of policing remit, and they were also spying on people who were campaigning against the police, and particularly families of both people who had died at the hands of the police and people like Stephen Lawrence, who'd been the victims of racist murders that the police had failed to investigate.
So the police were monitoring and reporting on the family justice campaigns for those people.
And so you start to get this just groundswell of what the fuck, and eventually Theresa May was the Home Secretary at the time. She came out and said, we're going to have a public inquiry, which is what the British state does when things...
They're hoping to park it into the long grass.
Exactly, yeah. They're like, look, we need to show we're doing something.
We'll talk about the inquiry in a bit, what that's achieved so far.
And my claim had carried on. The civil claim didn't really get anywhere. We ended up settling, but the process was different. And there's a lot of really boring, complicated legal stuff, which I could talk about for hours, but I'm sure nobody really wants to hear. But anyway...
But what about the disclosure you were getting?
We ended up in this weird, secret, draconian court that was basically set up when they introduced the Human Rights Act in the UK to hear claims against the secret state under the Human Rights Act. It's called the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. People have heard of it a bit more now, but at the time it was so secret you couldn't even find out how many cases it had tried, let alone what it had decided. And the civil claim was over. We hadn't received any disclosure. We hadn't seen any answers really. But we still had the option to go to the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. And we decided to do it, and we didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And we basically only did it because if you don't exhaust all the legal avenues in your country of origin, you can't go to Strasbourg and the European Court of Human Rights. So it was like, well, we have to do this. It's a bit of a, they're obviously going to put it all behind closed doors and find against us. And then they didn't. And the first hearing that we went to, the police applied, well, the second hearing, I don't know, there were a lot of hearings. Anyway, the police applied for secrecy, and the court said, and I think it was interesting because everywhere else we'd been, the police were saying, public interest immunity, national security, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was a bit like, oh, we don't know what to do with that. And we got to the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, and they were just like, nah, we do national security. That's not what this is. And they were actually really like, that we have secret powers. They do not exist to protect the reputation of the police. That's not what we're about. And I think it's important to say that there is a kind of background to that, which is that all of the stuff that we're talking about, all of the laws that kind of apply around undercover policing also apply to MI5. And none of that's really being discussed. And, that whole attitude of we're not here to protect the reputation of the police is kind of coming from the fact that, we are here to protect the reputation of MI5. So that's a whole can of worms that we don't know very much about. It's not part of the public inquiry, but I always feel it's important to mention that it's there.
Yes. But do you want to talk about the documentation? You actually managed to get the tribunal to...
So suddenly this investigative powers tribunal is not a secret court, and suddenly... and so one of the things that happened between us bringing our case in the beginning, which was, it was the 8 women, and it was around the issue of undercover officers having sexual relationships. But as we've said, in the meantime, all of these other officers are being uncovered and all of these other scandals are being uncovered. And by the time we got to the investigatory tribunal, I knew that I had known, I think it was 6 undercover officers at that point. It's now 7. And it was just a much, much bigger issue. So we'd added a bunch of stuff to the claim about the right to protest and about political policing and about Articles 10 and 11, the right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of assembly. And what that meant was that the police, who were by then quite happy to just say, we hold up our hands, these officers shouldn't have slept with these women, we're really sorry, we admit to everything, let it go. They weren't prepared to admit to that. And so it had to go to court. And at that point, we're starting to talk about evidence and disclosure. At that point, we've also completely run out of funding. And the lawyers have been working for free for about a year, and it's something's got to give. So by the time we actually started getting the documents, and I received about 1,800 pages of badly ordered, redacted evidence in the post.
Secret reports on you, yes.
I was a litigant in person. I was representing myself. So yes, a lot of what the book is about, I mean, it's called Disclosure, and there's all that context to it, but basically what the book is about is that just mad experience, and a lot of it happened during COVID as well, which made it even weirder, of just going through thousands of pages of reporting.
And
about
how
my
many
life.
of them were like this one? That was a particularly interesting one.
So
there's quite a lot of redactions.
There were a lot of redactions, and also just it was all very unhelpfully served. So there was no information about what this stuff was. A lot of it wasn't dated. The pages were in random order. Some of them were like, I was getting PDFs where they were upside down. So I was literally having to go through the PDF, turning each page over in order to be able to read it. But yes.
But when you actually started ordering it, what was coming out of the disclosure? What were they actually doing when they were monitoring you?
So, it's interesting. So a lot of what we've had in the public inquiry so far is about the SDS, the Special Demonstration Squad. They were a special branch unit. They were operating in London. In 2000, so like the people that, most of the officers that I knew, were working for a new unit called the National Public Order Intelligence Unit that was set up in 2000. And as the name suggests, it was a national unit. It was run out of London, but it was run together with other forces. So Mark's operation was Nottinghamshire, and they had a very different way of operating. And they actually had, by then people have mobile phones. I have to say, Mark Stone was the original phone addict. When most people weren't, he was there with his BlackBerry. He was always texting, and he was always texting his handler.
So he had somebody, nearby?
You don't always know where they are. There's some points in the disclosure where you can tell that they were actually physically there watching us. There's other points where they could be sitting around the corner or in a Holiday Inn or at home, and they keep a detailed log of Mark, who's reporting everything that he's doing. And by everything, I mean absolutely everything, like going for a curry, at the cinema, and obviously all of the
so they're kind of keeping
political and action
a
stuff
secret
as well.
diary of your life, basically,
so,
and the groups that you're involved with.
Was, and everything. I mean, there's more than 500 people named in the material that I got. That's not in the book. There's at the very end we got a court order saying that nobody could publish any information about other people, because of course once it's been heard in open court, those documents become public documents. But I mean, they're horrific, and none of those 500 people had any agency in this happening. So the book is about what was said about me, but there's a lot of other people in there.
So what happened in the end with that tribunal case?
We won, and there's
a bit in the book which just says, in passing, we won.
Yeah.
That's like the most dramatic bit in the book, and it's like 2 words.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of mad, really, because when we did win, that was when I looked back and went, whoa, we could have not won.
And what did you actually win then?
We won big. We basically won everything. So it wasn't just, the tribunal said this was not just about one man who had a sexual relationship. This was systemic. This happened because of a culture of sexism within the police. And these were unlawful political policing operations that have no place in a democratic society, which was massive, and it was much bigger. I mean, when we started, as the women, we were like, well, we just want to make sure this doesn't happen to any women ever again. It's worth saying, despite everything we've won, it's still not illegal for police officers to deceive women into sexual relationships, and we've got a petition, parliamentary petition, asking them to make it illegal that's just been launched. So check out the Police Spies Out of Lives website and sign the petition. I'm an anarchist. I was spied on because I'm an anarchist, and now I find myself doing things like promoting parliamentary petitions. But yeah, I mean, I think.
So can I say that? So the bigger picture now emerges about all the different hundreds of groups that were targeted, from CND to anti-racist groups and Troops Out of Ireland campaign. And I think one of the other disturbing things about these officers is
vegan whales.
Eat out vegan whales. Uist hedgehog
rescue. Yeah, I mean, it's...
and Greenham Common women, and so on. And also that most of the spies, police spies, also took active part in these movements, became secretaries and treasurers and so on, so they could get access to people's information. They were hoovering up mountains of information about thousands and thousands of people, and then writing weekly reports that were being sent to MI5. So all the stuff that's come out of the inquiry, largely it's because MI5 was keeping all these files.
Yeah.
The police destroyed them. They destroyed some of the files even after the inquiry started.
Yeah.
Controversially, but MI5, God love them, they kept everything forever on everybody.
I have to say, I went to a talk where they kind of had 2 sides, and we had Helen Steele and I think Shami Chakrabarti from Liberty speaking on the kind of civil liberties side, and then there was, I can't remember the names of the other two, but there was someone from the Office of the Information Commissioner and somebody from the House of Lords who wasn't necessarily introduced like this, but I definitely got the impression that she was some kind of House of Lords liaison with MI6. And the basic message of the other side was, it's absolutely terrible what happened to you, and this is what happens when you send a working man to do an Eton boys job. And there is definitely a certain amount of rivalry
between the secret services
and the police. So yeah, I think that we got all of this stuff from MI5 because they're hanging the cops out to dry. But so, yeah, it's a complicated story.
So I just want to say something about the inquiry, just because, I mean, obviously we want to give plenty of time for questions and answers. But so the inquiry's now been going on for how long? 8 years or something? £100 million has been spent. It's managed to get up to 1993, I think, so far. They're doing it kind of decade by decade, but now there's a big rush to finish it off within the next couple of years. But some of these police spies have been forced to give evidence on oath at the inquiry. I've given evidence already because I was targeted. I was several times. I was targeted from the mid-1970s onwards, and so we've had tens of thousands of documents. It's absolutely quite incredible. Industrial scale reporting on groups, campaign groups. It's very, very interesting. It's an absolute disaster for the police because it was all meant to be top secret, even the fact that they existed. But also the police have been forced to make apology after apology for targeting anti-racist groups, for the sexual relationships. What else have they apologised?
Using dead children's
identities.
I mean, they have apologised for using dead children's identities, but I think it's also important to say that there is one family involved in the public inquiry who are not allowed to tell anybody that they're involved in the public inquiry, and they're not allowed to use their own family name because the cop who stole their kid's identity has been given anonymity by the inquiry.
Yes.
And so you know, there's the inquiry. I mean, Dave and I, it's very rare that we're in the same room, but we work together a lot on this inquiry, and we kind of, he's very good at why it's good and why it's positive and why we're
slaughtering them, yes.
And I spend most of my time going, fucking bastards. And you know, they are.
It is hard work as well. I mean, everything we've had to really drag out of the police.
Yeah.
And there's more to come, isn't there?
If you read the book, there's a character in it called EN31. Those are the kind of names we're being given for these officers. EN31 was Mark's handler for 7 years. 4 years ago, the public inquiry said that they would be publishing his name eventually. This week, they've changed their mind. I don't know if that's because I published a book about him,
he's a big feature in the book.
He is a big feature.
But he wants to keep remain anonymous.
Yeah, he has applied to the public inquiry to remain anonymous, and they've just said that they are thinking of not. I intend to fight this tooth and nail because this is the man that wrote it all down.
So there's lots of stuff going on now behind the scenes in the inquiry. In fact, you've just about to submit a statement on behalf of Reclaim the Streets, which was a big movement.
About the same length as my book.
Yeah, 250 pages. That's hopefully going in tonight,
it should be going in tonight. I don't know. I haven't looked at the messages.
Yes. So people are writing they're getting lots of documents and they're writing reports and submitting them to the inquiry. So there's more to come. The hearings are going to be starting in October and going on for about 6 months and that will cover the 90s and 2000s and then early 2000s and 10s. Up to about 2010. So, so before we go for questions, what are the lessons from all this? What have we learned from all this? Are we frightened or are we feeling powerful and that we've slaughtered them?
Well, I mean, one thing I will say about the inquiry is that it is a fantastic social history of political movements in this country. I mean, the fact that for 50 years, they had people following us around and writing everything down is in some ways amazing, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I wouldn't have remembered.
Like, blimey, yeah, you start remembering lots of stuff that you'd forgotten about. Yes.
And you know, I think,
of course, they make up loads of lies as well. But you read between the lines, so this was really quite a powerful movement that they were scared. They're scared of movements for change and campaigns like Reclaim the Streets or Hunt Sabbing and Greenham Common.
Really went for the Hunt Sabbs.
And most of these movements have been very successful. I mean, you know, we haven't got rid of capitalism and governments, but we have actually, you know, a lot of the ideas that they saw as extremist are pretty mainstream.
Yeah, that is another thing that has been coming out. I mean, it was quite amusing watching the inquiry barrister cross-examining Lord Peter Hain about the anti-apartheid movement, and at some point, you know, about whether they were subversive and whether they had links to the Communist Party. And at some point, Peter Hain just turned around and said, "You've got to be a bit careful, otherwise it's going to come out looking like this inquiry supported the apartheid regime in South Africa, because that's what the police did, and you know they're asking the police's questions." And there's a lot of that where it's kind of a little bit embarrassing now for the police to find. But my favourite moment was when the first woman undercover officer was asked what she was spying on, and she was sent in. She was the first woman. They brought her in to spy on the Women's Liberation Front, and you know they were talking about childcare, and they were talking about equal pay. Organising they were
jumble
talking
sales.
about equal pay for equal work for women. And the inquiry said, "Well, were you paid the same as your male colleagues?" And she said, "No, I got 90% of the pay of my male colleagues because I was a woman." And you know, it's just pretty embarrassing for them now. So yeah, I mean, some of the lessons that we're learning are quite nice.
Also, we've managed to get everyone to work together, which is quite amazing. There's kind of different campaign groups, there's left parties, there's even MPs, and we've got everybody working together to expose what's happened.
The communists, the anarchists, the environmentalists, the animal rights people, everybody's all in there and working together, and has been for a decade.
So it can be done. Shall we go to Q&A?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing that, you know, people ask, and I kind of want to preempt it a bit, is whether this is still going on, or, you know, what the lessons are for people who are campaigning today. And it's a really, really hard one to answer.
So don't ask that question,
so,
because we don't know.
No, I mean, it's important, and one of the things I think it's really important, I don't do these talks to scare people off. And you know, I don't actually regret any of it. Like, some of it was quite shit. But
what's interesting is how frightened the establishment is of movements that are actually quite, you know, they're not actually doing. Well, there's thousands of people that are, you know, maybe having a march or giving out leaflets, or, you know, it's not actually, they're targeting movements that are pretty mainstream, because they're frightened that they're going to grow and really make a difference. So I think we should throw it open here to Q&A. I'm not sure what the time is and how we're getting on. Have we got 20 minutes, half an hour left, yeah? Okay, so we'll start from the back. Right.